So let's start with this massive assumption that honestly, practically all of us make.
Oh, definitely.
When you picture Generation Z, right, like the cohort born between what, 1997 and 2012?
Yeah, exactly. The ultimate digital natives.
Right, the people who essentially grew up with smartphones glued to their hands, you just naturally assume they are the most enthusiastic, aggressive adopters of artificial intelligence.
It feels like the safest bet in the world, you know?
Totally. I mean, if you are managing a team right now, you probably expect your 23-year-old new hires to be, well, basically running circles around everyone else with these tools.
You'd think so. I mean, if anyone is going to seamlessly integrate a massive technological shift into their daily lives, it should be the demographic that has literally never experienced a world without ubiquitous digital connectivity.
But that is what makes this so incredibly fascinating. A whole new stack of research, which is anchored by some really brilliant work from Dr. Jonathan H. Westover, reveals that we actually have the entire narrative backward.
Completely backwards.
Yeah, Gen Z is actually caught in the middle of this massive confidence gap.
Right.
Their exposure to these tools is obviously soaring because, companies and schools are pushing it everywhere. But their actual voluntary usage has completely plateaued.
It's just stalled out.
Exactly. The excitement is dropping fast. Right. And wild as it sounds, negative emotions like anger and severe anxiety regarding the technology are actually rising sharply among young people.
It's a really profound paradox that we absolutely need to figure out. I mean, we're talking about the generation that will make up over a quarter of the global workforce within the next year.
A quarter of the workforce. That's massive.
Right. So this is no longer just a conversation about whether teenagers like a new software update or not. It's a fundamental question about organizational effectiveness, innovation, and frankly, how we are going to define human capability moving forward.
So if you are listening to this and wondering why your newest employees or even your kids aren't acting like the AI evangelists that Silicon Valley promised, well, that is exactly the mystery we are unpacking in this deep dive.
Yeah, we have a lot of ground to cover.
We really do. We are pulling from deep dive data from the Walton Family Foundation, GSV Ventures, and Gallup. We want to understand why the very people meant to define the future of work are actively rejecting the hype and, what actually needs to happen to fix it.
So to kind of set the table here, let's look at the sheer reality of this usage plateau. Because when we talk about generative AI for this 14 to 29 age group, we mean tools like ChatGPT, Claude, DLE, things like that.
The big names, right?
Exactly. And despite the billions of dollars organizations have spent on AI infrastructure and integration over the last year, Gen Z's adoption is just firmly stalled.
It's totally flat.
Yeah, weekly usage is sitting right at 51%, and it is not moving upward.
And the emotional shift year over year is what really caught my eye in the data. Because excitement about AI among this demographic has dropped 14 points.
That's a huge drop.
It is. Meanwhile, active anger is actually up 9 points. And anxiety is just holding incredibly steady, with 42% of them feeling anxious about it.
Which is staggering.
I mean, think about that. When almost half of a demographic feels anxious, and nearly a third are actively angry about a new technology, that is not an IT implementation issue.
No, not at all. You are dealing with a severe psychological barrier. Organizations are rapidly expanding access, right? They're putting it on every corporate laptop and every single school Chromebook.
Right, and just forcing it everywhere.
Exactly. But that forced access is actually generating a negative affect.
It honestly makes me think of like getting a mandatory, totally free membership to the most advanced state-of-the-art gym in the entire world.
That's a good way to look at it.
Right, like everyone has the key card, the doors are propped wide open.
Yeah.
But nobody is actually working out any more than they used to.
Yeah.
Strangely, people are just standing around in the lobby getting furious. So, what is driving these bad vibes? Where are the habits breaking down?
Well, to figure out what's happening in that lobby, we have to look at where tech habits actually originate for young people. And the research points to this really fascinating, somewhat hidden correlation, particularly for K through 12 students.
Okay, what is it?
Usage is heavily tethered to parental behavior.
Really? Parental behavior?
Yeah. The data shows that if a student's parents use AI daily, 51% of those kids will also use it daily.
Okay, well, that makes sense. Monkey see, monkey do.
Right, but look at the inverse. If the parents never use it, Student usage drops to a mere 6%.
Wait, 6%?
Just 6%.
That is a massive cliff. So it's not peer pressure driving this at all.
No.
It isn't even what their teachers are assigning in the classroom. It really just comes down to household normalization.
Which tells us something crucial. Technology adoption is fundamentally a social behavior. It's not just a product of individual access. I mean, think about it. A blank text box that can do literally anything is incredibly intimidating.
Oh, totally. It's paralyzing.
Exactly. But watching a parent use it to, say, draft a complicated email to a landlord or plan out a family road trip, that provides a mental model for actual utility.
It grounds it in reality.
Right. It moves the technology from being this weird novelty or like a cheating tool to just being an everyday utility.
Okay, so that answers the usage plateau.
Yeah.
But it still doesn't explain the anger.
True.
Because if you don't know how to use a tool, you might just ignore it, right?
Yeah.
But you don't usually get furious at it.
No, you usually just leave it in the drawer.
Exactly. So to understand that anger, we have to look at the trust deficit. And the Gallup data here is jarring. 69% of Gen Z workers say they explicitly trust purely human work.
Okay.
But only 28% trust AI-assisted work. And practically zero trust AI-only output.
They just do not trust the machine, period.
Right.
But, it goes so much deeper than just worrying about hallucinations or, like, getting a bad answer. They are terrified of what the machine is actually doing to their own cognitive abilities.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this isn't traditional technophobia where people fear a robot is going to shoot lasers at them.
Yeah.
It's an existential fear of cognitive erosion.
Cognitive erosion.
Yes. 38% of these young people believe the technology actively harms creativity. 42% say it damages critical thinking.
Jeez.
And an absolutely staggering 80% worry it will make future learning more difficult.
Okay, I have to push back hard on that premise because, the entire marketing pitch from Silicon Valley is that this technology accelerates learning, right?
That's a pitch, yeah.
It synthesizes complex data. It summarizes 100-page reports in seconds. It gives you a starting template for your code. Yeah. If you have a tool that gives you the answer instantly, why on earth would 80% of young people think that makes learning harder?
Because instinctively and honestly, perhaps through painful lived experience, Gen Z understands a psychological concept called productive struggle.
Productive struggle.
Yeah. True learning, the kind that builds deep, adaptable, permanent expertise, requires friction.
Okay, I'm following you.
When you grapple with a dense text, or when you sit there staring at a blank screen struggling to structure a persuasive argument, or when you repeatedly fail to debug a line of code, your brain is actively building neural pathways.
Right, so the struggle is the actual workout.
Exactly. Returning to your gym analogy, yes. AI is essentially a machine that lifts the weights for you. The weight gets lifted. The task is technically accomplished.
But your muscles didn't do the work.
Right. They didn't do the work, so they do not grow. In cognitive psychology and labor economics, this is known as de-skilling.
De-skilling.
Yeah, the research from David Autor and other economists shows that when users delegate underlying competencies to automated systems without maintaining those skills themselves, their fundamental baseline abilities erode.
Wow, so Gen Z isn't angry because the software is buggy?
Yeah.
They are angry because they feel pressured to use a tool that they suspect will ultimately make them less capable, less interesting humans.
That is the absolute core of the confidence gap. Nearly half, 48% of Gen Z, actually believes the workplace risks of this technology outweigh its benefits. They see the trap really clearly.
That is a terrifying realization for a 22-year-old trying to navigate a fiercely competitive job market.
Oh, absolutely terrifying.
If this poses such a massive risk to learning and skill development, we really need to look at how this risk and the access to the tools themselves is distributed across society. Because as you might guess from looking at any other resource, it is highly unequal.
Highly unequal. The distribution reveals some major structural issues and often in very counterintuitive ways.
Right.
When you look at the demographic breakdowns for weekly usage, it varies wildly. Asian Gen Z respondents use it the most at 60%, followed by Black respondents at 57%.
Okay.
Hispanic respondents sit at 52%, and white respondents are at 47%. We also see a slight gender divide, with males at 54% and females at 50%.
But the data regarding income and school resources is where I honestly had to stop and reread the report twice.
Yeah, it's wild.
Let's talk about lower-income K-12 students. As anyone might expect, they are significantly less likely to have formal school policies regarding the technology. It's about 62% compared to 91% for upper-income students.
Which is a huge gap.
Right, and they also have less overall computer access. But here is the massive paradox. Their schools are actually more likely to provide the AI tools and allow their use for schoolwork.
It is a profound and honestly a somewhat tragic contradiction.
It really is.
Think about how a resource-constrained environment operates. They often lack the administrative capacity, the funding, or even the dedicated IT staff to develop comprehensive, nuanced governance.
So they're just winging it.
Pretty much. So instead of managing the technology, they oscillate between totally restricting it, which fails, or just blindly permitting it because they can't afford the software to police it.
Are under-resourced schools essentially handing kids a volatile power tool without a safety manual, while wealthy schools are taking the time to build a comprehensive woodshop curriculum first?
That is a perfect way to visualize the data. Giving a student unrestricted access to a generative tool to quote-unquote help with homework without teaching them prompt engineering, the risks of bias, or how to critically evaluate the output, it's a massive disservice.
Because it just skips the learning.
Exactly. It accelerates the de-skilling process we just talked about. They just get the answers and learn absolutely nothing. Wealthier districts, on the other hand, are building the scaffolding. They are creating pedagogical frameworks that teach students how to use the technology to augment their thinking, not replace it entirely.
So if schools are dropping the ball this badly, what happens when these kids show up at their first corporate job?
It's a rough collision.
I mean, these college grads are walking right into a workplace that is completely obsessed with efficiency and headcount reduction.
Yeah.
Are companies fixing this? Or are they making the confidence gap worse?
Right now, many are making it substantially worse.
Really?
Yeah. To understand the corporate failure, we have to look at the psychological contract.
The psychological contract.
All right, so traditionally, employment involves this unwritten psychological exchange. You, the employee, give your effort, your time, and your loyalty. In return, the employer provides compensation, security, and a pathway for career development.
Right, a mutual investment in the future.
But generative AI introduces massive, looming uncertainty that completely shatters this contract for entry-level workers. They do not know if the job they are training for today will even exist in 18 months. They feel completely disposable.
Wow. So if you are a manager listening to this, how do you actually build trust and competency? I mean, you can't just toss software licenses at your new hires, tell them to be 30% more productive, and expect a miracle.
No, that never works. The organizations that are successfully bridging this gap are explicitly renegotiating that psychological contract.
How so?
Well, take J.P. Morgan Chase. They made a highly public commitment that no employee will lose their job solely to AI automation during a specific 5-year transition period.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they coupled that promise with massive internal investments in reskilling.
That is a huge, bold guarantee for a major bank.
Yeah.
I mean, it takes the existential dread of, am I training my digital replacement right off the table?
Exactly. It signals that the organization values the human being, not just the completion of the task. But psychological security alone isn't enough,
Right.
You also need to build competence safely. And this brings us to a crucial structural concept called graduated autonomy. If you want to understand how to roll this out, think about medical residencies.
Oh, okay. So, you don't just hand a scalpel to a first-year medical student, point to a patient and say, go figure out that appendectomy. See you in an hour.
Exactly. And yet, that is exactly how most companies are deploying enterprise AI.
Just handing them the scalpel.
Yep. In medicine, residents progress from observation to supervised practice to highly restricted independent work and finally to full autonomy. Applied to the corporate world, this means organizations absolutely should not provide unrestricted access on day one.
That makes total sense.
Some of the most forward-thinking firms are actually requiring employees to demonstrate fundamental skills independently before they even get the AI tools.
Really? Like who?
McKinsey, for instance.
Okay.
They require their junior consultants to prove they have fundamental analytical and research skills first before they are allowed to use the firm's AI augmentation tools.
I absolutely love that approach. It is the ultimate show your work rule.
Yeah, it really is.
It is exactly like a math teacher saying you cannot use the graphing calculator until you prove you know how to do long division on a piece of paper.
Precisely.
You have to know the underlying mechanics.
Yeah.
Because when the calculator eventually spits out a wrong answer, you need the human intuition to look at it and say, wait, that doesn't look right. The decimal is in the wrong place.
That intuition, that gut check, that is precisely what Gen Z fears losing. By formalizing the graduated autonomy process, by a company explicitly telling young workers, we want your critical thinking first and the AI's speed second, the company validates the human element. They are intentionally protecting the productive struggle.
Skill scaffolding makes total sense logically. But let's look at the emotional side of the workplace for a minute.
Sure.
Because none of that scaffolding is going to work if the culture remains punishing, or if every single decision is purely driven by squeezing every last drop of profit out of a process. The research highlights that Gen Z demands psychological safety, and they demand purpose.
Which raises an uncomfortable question for most executives about how we actually handle errors. Because if you want people to learn a new, highly unpredictable technology, they have to feel completely safe failing with it.
Right, because they're going to fail.
Constantly, we need an explicit public normalization of the learning process. Adobe actually has an incredibly smart program called AI Learning Champions.
Yes, that.
They intentionally recruit senior leaders and executives to publicly share their AI failures. They literally post about their messy experimentations, their terrible prompts, and the times the software completely hallucinated garbage on them.
That is so disarming. Think about the dynamic there.
It changes everything.
It really does. If the VP of marketing gets on a company all hands and admits they spent 3 hours fighting with an image generator only to get a picture of a dog with 6 legs, it suddenly makes it entirely okay for the 23-year-old marketing coordinator to raise their hand and say, hey, I'm struggling with this too.
Exactly. It completely removes the stigma of incompetence. Another brilliant approach to psychological safety is peer mentorship.
Okay, how does that work?
Target has set up these cross-functional AI cohorts. By grouping early career employees from entirely different departments to learn the technology together, they remove the isolation of navigating it alone.
That's smart.
It provides social validation. You aren't the only one who doesn't get it. But to address your point about purpose, this is where the values alignment comes in. Gen Z doesn't just want to know how to use the tool, they desperately care about why it is being used in the first place.
Well, let's talk about the why. Because frankly, my skepticism meter always flashes a little bit when we talk about corporate purpose.
Fair enough.
I mean, is it really realistic to expect massive publicly traded corporations to prioritize a quote-unquote learning journey or deep societal purpose over immediate efficiency and cost cutting? Wall Street usually rewards the cost cuts.
It is a very fair skepticism. But look at Novo Nordisk as an example.
Okay.
When they deploy AI in their pharmaceutical research, they do not frame it internally as a neat trick to cut R&D costs or reduce the headcount of lab technicians. They frame it explicitly and repeatedly as a tool to accelerate the development of therapies for unmet medical needs. They connect the tool directly to the mission of saving patient lives.
Okay, but let me play devil's advocate here. A cynic would just call that good PR spin. Corporate marketing to make the medicine go down easier.
Even if you view it purely cynically, the underlying economic reality forces their hand. If companies ignore Gen Z's values, they face a catastrophic retention risk.
Yeah, the retention risk.
Remember the earlier data. 48% of this generation believes the risks outweigh the benefits. If a company implements this technology purely as a labor-saving, cost-cutting mechanism without addressing these ethical and purpose-driven concerns, they will bleed their top early career talent.
And talent is expensive.
Exactly. Losing your pipeline of future leaders is vastly more expensive to the bottom line than whatever you just saved on a software license.
That makes perfect business sense when you lay it out like that. It is really an intertemporal trade-off. The company might save a few bucks today by automating a junior copywriter role, but they essentially bankrupt their talent pool for tomorrow.
And that brings us to the core realization of this entire body of research. The Gen Z confidence gap proves, without a shadow of a doubt, that AI adoption is not an IT issue.
It's not just plugging in servers.
No, you cannot solve this by upgrading your servers, buying enterprise licenses, and mandating a 1-hour training video. This is fundamentally a human behavior and organizational psychology challenge. True literacy requires scaffolding, it requires transparent limitations, and most importantly, it requires fiercely protecting the cognitive, productive struggle that makes us human.
As we wrap this up, I want you, the listener, to reflect on your own daily habits for a second. Think about the last time you fired up one of these tools. Were you using it to skip the hard part of learning? Are you letting the machine do the heavy lifting in the gym while you stand comfortably in the lobby? Or are you using it as a collaborative partner after you have already flexed your own critical thinking muscles?
It is the stark difference between replacing your own intellect and augmenting your capabilities.
I want to leave you with one final, deeply provocative thought that really stuck with me from the skilling research we discussed. Think about the structure of the traditional corporate ladder. If companies use this technology to completely automate away all the mundane, routine, repetitive tasks, well, let's be honest, those are exactly the tasks entry-level workers have traditionally used to learn the ropes.
The foundational stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Those boring spreadsheets and basic reports are how you understand the business from the ground up. It is how you experience that necessary productive struggle. If we automate all of that away in the name of efficiency, how will the next generation ever build the foundational expertise required to eventually become senior leaders? If nobody's allowed to do the heavy lifting in the gym today, who is going to be strong enough to run the place tomorrow?